I believe in your initial email to us, you informed us that the state of the global film market is quite different today than it was a few years ago. Can you elaborate how it's changed?
Well, there was certainly a bottleneck that companies went through, I think, around the time of COVID, where the buying of independent for sale movies shrank. The buying by distributors or production companies of already made films has seemingly retracted a bit. The market reasons for that I'm not an expert on, but it certainly is, kind of common knowledge at this point that the buying end of the business has shrank a bit. And foreign territory sales, which used to be very valuable for movies that originate here in the United States or in the Western, even in Western Europe, those have fallen off because, and I think for the right reason, that a lot of national and regional cinemas are creating content of their own that their own constituents want to see more than export movies, from here or from Western Europe and places that used to be larger movie export hubs. Hollywood would get a lot of overseas territory buys of their content. I mean, they still do for larger movies, but it has tapered off because other countries and regional cinemas are making their own content now that is more relevant to their people, more relevant to their national and cultural and political interests at a given time. And, I mean, that's I think all well and good, but it does change some of the financing strategy that at least larger Hollywood movies had. I don't know that it impacts indies quite as much, but Hollywood movies used to kind of get their finance up and going by way of foreign pre-sales. If you had a famous actor is going to play this role in this genre of movie, then you can go to any number of buying entities and territory countries that would give you pre-sale money before the movie's even made, just on concept, log line, actor who's attached, etc. And that fed into how those movies got off the ground financially, because they could rely on this early distribution money, essentially, that would come in at the start before they shot. So that's changed. That has slowed down, and I don't know if it's just a temporary dip or if it's kind of a permanent lay of the land now. But it does cause a bit of recalibration, I think, in the industry at large, and understanding how to mosaic finance into place to make movies. And a lot of people I know quite well, and even in some of my own thinking, have become much more inclined towards looking into co-production with countries, instead of just trying to originate material. Let's say here in the United States, there are opportunities to work with countries that have great shooting resources, great crews, great tax incentives, not to peel business away from here, which we know, California is going through a dip of its own in terms of having enough production here anymore. So, no one's interested in trying to peel that away. Certainly not myself, because I live here. I want to continue to work here. But there are new models of how finance is coming together, and how, we're all able as creatives and business people in the film industry to kind of pivot with the times and find new solutions, because there are new problems to solve.
Right, Bulgaria. I think a lot of people have been filming there.
Yeah, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Romania, even Hungary. I know has a tremendous amount of shooting. We've had conversations with teams in Australia about a particular shoot that would make a lot of sense there. So it's very interesting to see. Oftentimes to see what movies that look so particular to a given region that, let's say, they're set in, if it's Midwest United States, whatever the case may be, and you find out where it was actually really shot, and you're shocked that it, sometimes they shoot these things at thousands and thousands of miles away from where they're pertaining to actually be. So, there's tricky considerations with all that because, you want production to stay where you live and where you flourish as a creative and as a working community of artists. If you want to keep production here or wherever you are, but it's gotten complicated financially to make that as reasonable as a prospect as maybe it was several years ago.
And for you, with Sight, your new movie, you shot it here in North Carolina, is that correct?
I shot it in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we didn't shoot one frame of it in California. And that was partly because of cost, and it was also largely because of where we wanted the story to look like it was set. We wanted a very sort of rural feeling with woods and small town feel and that kind of thing. So that wasn't as easy to duplicate here. We looked into it. We certainly tried. And they've made just recently they've made the California shooting incentives a bit more easy to come by than they had recently been, because it was a lottery system and it was very difficult to get financial incentives to shoot in the state. And I believe at the government level they've made that a couple of really good amendments to that recently. But yeah, we shot in North Carolina, and there's also something interesting, I think, as a filmmaker, and I just want to add this to the mix. There's something interesting about sort of being pulled out of your known zone, just regionally and geographically, to make a film, because when you get to go home and sleep in your own bed and have all your own stuff and like know where everything is and know where your dishes are and know where your TV remotes are and things like that, it sort of takes you out of the imaginative process, right? Because you go into this sort of routinized, expected living arrangement. When you're on a location and pulled out of that familiarity, in a way, it forces you to stay more in the work, because you don't get to leave that sort of imaginative zone and go back into your little cocoon of normalcy and expectation and routine. So I found shooting out of state and far, in a region I was not particularly familiar with, was actually kind of creatively good juice. Because I felt very displaced, and I was away from, loved ones. I was away from my routines. I was away from things I could kind of rely on as my release valves of just activities and things, walks I would take and on given days and given places. Couldn't do any of that. I had to kind of reinvent my patterning entirely, and that, in a way, sort of kept me inside of the headspace of the movie even more, because I couldn't go back into a normal routine, which, for some people I think maybe wouldn't work for them. For me, I found it actually kind of did.
I think you said that previously, that constraints lend to creativity, whether it's monetary, and this sounds like this was a constraint of like creature comforts and, like you said, your little cocoon of your daily life. Yeah. And that how it informs creativity. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was an interesting process. Yeah. It was very interesting. I think there's only been a time or two when I've been able to sort of step out of my normal expected living mode and then just kind of drive to making a project daily. I haven't had many opportunities to actually do that. Not when I'm directing. Although I did it once in the most contrary way to that, where I actually shot the bulk of a movie I was making in a house that I was renting and living in, which made it the movie inescapable, literally, because I was like going to the refrigerator tiptoeing through C-stands and stuff in the middle of the night. It was a bit much, but there's interesting ways to do it each time around. Like you take each one on its own rules.
It sounds like Blue Fox Entertainment has done a lot for your movie site. Can we talk about how you came across them and how you ended up partnering?
Yeah, they've been great to partner with, and they've done a lot in terms of getting the movie out there and getting it visible and people knowing about it and talking about it, and we're very, very grateful for all that. They actually came on my radar by way of an executive who was working with them as a consultant, and I had been speaking with her about a different project, and just through kind of through the conversation, it became a talking point that, oh, you know, they might actually be interested in this, and you should talk to them about this piece. And it wasn't until after we had shot that we got into league with Blue Fox, but they decided, even when we were in editorial, that they wanted to come on based on the script and on the genre and on who we had cast, that they believed in what we were doing and the ambition of the project, and they were a very early supporter and champion. Even quite honestly, when they hadn't seen but a couple of excerpted scenes from early edits, you know. So that was great to have you know, a company like that come and champion us as a smaller private equity based, you know, indie that they decided to believe in early on, and that made a big difference in us being able to get it out into the world.
Had you reached a deal with a major studio, what would your path forward have been? How would it have been different?
I don't think I would have learned as much about myself as a person. I don't think I would have grown as much as an individual, because I think when you're in the indie path, you have to fight all of your battles yourself, or with a very select team. You know, almost the buck stops at you in that context, and you don't have a big phalanx of other executives and lawyers and marketing departments and, you know, HR and PR departments, whatever, that can come in and, you know, kind of save the day if a fire pops up, or if you need a solution to a problem, or you lose a location, and you know, there's a way they can be a resource to manage those kinds of things. In an indie context, you don't have that. You have to be very quick on your feet in problem solving and in tactile, almost, you know, not to keep using the warfare analogy, because I think it makes it seem like all this is just conflict nonstop, and it's not. I mean, a lot of it is a bit, but to use the analogy, though, it's kind of like you have to change your battle plan all the time when you're making an indie. Even, you know, I mean, I've been through so many instances where I had to rewrite scenes on the fly because we knew we were going to lose a child actor because of their, you know, their mandatory casting hours that they can be on a set. So we're going to lose some lines because we didn't have time to get the shots with them, or we were going to lose part of a piece of a location, and we had to pivot and sort of rewrite where the scene blocking takes place because of time constraints. If you're on a studio and you could push more time, and it's a question of, you know, lobbying for extra monies to do extra work that got out from under you from whatever reason, those resources do exist. You don't have them in the indie world. So it forces you to become a tactician decision maker and very, very cool and collected under pressure, because you're constantly under acute pressure. So, you know, there's life value from those lessons. That can be parlayed into many, many different aspects of daily life and in the strategy for how you go through life, because you have been forced to make clutch decisions over and over again, and trust your own judgment and begin to rely on your own, you know, your own say-so that maybe you do have a good answer, you know, and I think that's important as any given person to come to points of self-belief and self-reliance where you've been put through enough tests and come out of them with at least some of the answers right, that you can rely on yourself to go into these circumstances and come out, you know, somewhat fortuitous, hopefully. And, you know, I guess if you have a buffet laid out in front of you, you're not as specific about what you want to eat, you know. If that's now, so if you're working with a studio and you could do that, and you could do that, and money's not as much of an object, and there's a lot of resource and a lot of team around you, believe me, if someone offered it to me as soon as the camera stops rolling today, I would very much consider it based on the particular project. But I'm very grateful that the indie path has been the one that I've tread more or less thus far, because I think there are tremendous specifics that you learn about yourself, and you learn about your capacity also as a creative and as an artist, because you are forced to be so more disciplined and more very, very quick in problem solving circumstances. So you really know how to pinpoint solutions, and I think that's just valuable for any living circumstance, not just making a movie, but, you know, I mean, you name it. I think those are valuable life skills. So, you know, I mean, are there easier roads? Is there more padding in other ways of going about this? Yeah, there is. But that doesn't mean I don't feel that the path taken wasn't, you know, thus far the right one, at least for me personally.
And the flip side is that there's no departmental deadlock. There's no, well, this department didn't give a memo to this department,
Right.
and therefore this isn't happening. It's all on your shoulders, for better or worse. So,
yeah. But that creates communication skills too. You know, that creates a necessary webbing of how you talk to your team, how you preserve a common goal and morale with your team, which is essential, because you're all there for the same end goal. You know. So yeah, there's a lot of positive and a lot of value in sort of the softer science of what making indie movies does to you as an individual, that I think is really valuable. And you know, if I thought about where would I be as a person and as a, you know, sort of a self-aware being if I hadn't gone through my indie film processes now, I don't know what experience would have given me those same insights that I do have now, and would have created who I believe I've become as a person without those. I think they were integral to me.
thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.